We pulled in ahead of that guy, and from what I saw, it wasn't something that he was exactly encouraging. Now maybe we'll try to pull in ahead of this Nissan here. I'll give him enough room before I put it on. And it turns out that he was going in another lane anyway. Got quite a bit of traffic right now. The guy coming up behind me, so I'll go into that lane. So I see lane changing as being one of the more complex maneuvers that people do. It's obviously no problem at all if there's no traffic, but you do have to judge the traffic. And human perception seems to be, I think, more than what's available to the autopilot. We get to see further distances. The autopilot can see plenty ahead, but behind it can really only see about 16 feet. So it's up to me to see that there's nobody approaching quick from behind. The autopilot can tell me if there's anybody in the blind spot, so that's very useful. And if I see somebody approaching fairly quick, like the guy who's about to pass me now, I wouldn't normally try to do a lane change there. So I won't ask the autopilot to do it either. So my test of this will be that I will ask the autopilot to do what I would do, but nothing more difficult. But having said that, there are situations where I want to get into that lane, one or the other, so that I won't miss a turnoff that's coming up. And so in those cases, I'll try to judge the situation and so that I can get into that lane, but sometimes it's quite tight. So normally I guess what I would do there would be put on my turn signal long enough so everybody understands what I'm going to try and do. And sometimes it turns out that people aren't all that cooperative about it and they just keep on coming anyway. And I think most drivers will find themselves in the kind of situation where they have to force the issue a little bit. they've got their turn signal on, the guy's coming anyway, but maybe not that fast. And so a lot of drivers will just start to make the lane change anyway. And basically, you know, he's got two choices. He can hit you, which obviously he's not going to do, so he has to slow down. Now, this is a situation that has come up fairly often, that one right there. And it's where you lose a lane and there's still traffic ahead of you. And if that traffic was in the faster lane, or say closer to the center line, and you were in the slower lane, closer to the outside boundary of the road, this autopilot will tend to keep on going as if it's going to pass that guy ahead on the inside, even though there's no lane there for him to do it, for the autopilot to do it. So I think that's something that has to be corrected. It's not necessarily going to cause an accident, but passing somebody on the inside when there's not much room is not the right thing to do. Most drivers won't try and do that, and if they do, it makes them a bad driver. So that's something that the autopilot needs to be working on, I think, the developers of it. As I've mentioned in other videos, the autopilot has a routine for handling that situation where two lanes merge into one lane. And the autopilot's method is normally, not in every case, but normally it finds the outside lane and goes strictly by it. Because when the two lanes merge into one, the road becomes wider, the lane becomes wider once the line separating those two lanes going the same way disappears. And the autopilot doesn't like a lane that's too wide. I don't know whether it can actually see the other lane, but what it likes to do is go to the right lane, hug that lane, and just ride along with it until it converges with the center lane, which shepherds the Tesla over towards the center lane, and then it can pick up that lane, and then it's got two lanes again. And that's the obviously good way of doing it, because the alternative would be to find the center lane and hug that. But if there's any uncertainty at all about the validity of the center lane, I guess, then there would be some risk that you would be closer and possibly in danger of going into the oncoming traffic. And the autopilot is designed to avoid that under that circumstance, and probably lots of other circumstances. So there that guy's slowing quick. I didn't put my foot on the brake. I was prepared to, but I normally do, but this time I wanted to wait and just see what happens, and it stopped in plenty of time for that car ahead of us. I've got the forward collision alert on early, and if I had it on late, it might not have beeped at all. This upcoming thing is a turn that I've been around lots of times. the speed limit doesn't change to 70 until we get around this curve. And the autopilot complains and actually asks me to take control if I'm going 80 around there, but I put it down to 70 before we went around there and it had no problem. Now we're going 70 and the roads can take higher than 70, but they just leave it like that for a while. So as I've said also before, I'm doing this kind of investigation in these videos on the basis of following Tesla's guidelines and also keeping the speed limit, whether I would or not normally. And I think doing those things give a good test of the autopilot. Now here we're passing an 80. As soon as we pass it, the speed limit indicated on the dash sign, the speed limit sign changes to 80. So I'll put the speed up to 80, set my set speed up to 80. And actually in that case where it's 80, nobody here goes 80. So I do go up to 85 or 90 because it's kind of dumb to drive along slower than everybody else. The thing when it goes down to 70, there's usually a good reason for that. Something to do with the road conditions. And at least along this section of road, when they put the speed limit down to something like 70, it's not just conservative, it's actually needed. So that's what I've been doing. But for the regular speed limit, which is 80 or 90, I've been going about 10 kilometers faster than that. Now I'm going to go a little faster because I'm actually looking for traffic in case I want to do some lane changes and such forth. So after we pass this car ahead of us, I'll go into his lane. And I'll put my signal on at about the same time as I would if I were driving myself. And it's a good test here because it's, yeah, that's pretty decent, I'd say. It was on a curve, so the autopilot had other stuff to concern itself with, but it did that lane change, I'd say, just about perfectly.